Everyone refused to bond with the blind Apache chief's daughter until this cowboy staked his life for her. Brimstone Gulch, Wyoming Territory, October 1883. One mistaken mark. One bound woman. One Wild West, love that set a broken man free. The wind cut like iron filing. It scraped the paint from doors and drove dust between a man's teeth till the world tasted like old nails. I tied my mare, checked the knot, and told myself I was only in town for wire, salt, and coffee, nothing more than what kept a fence upright and a man breathing through winter. Then I heard something that didn't belong to the land, a faint rustle of beads, a sound too careful for the street. I turned, and at the center of Brimstone Gulch, they'd raised an old crate like a stage for sin. Upon it stood a woman blindfolded with a strip of blue-stitched muslin, wrists bound by rawhide. The wind worried her torn deerskin dress and found every place her dignity tried to hide. Folks ringed her like they were at a hanging. Deputy Wade Hollister grinned with a cigarette half lit. "Bonding day," he said. "Agency man sent her down. Someone signs, someone takes her. Else she stands there till she drops." The crowd chuckled. Nobody moved. She was still as stone, head lifted. The blindfold covered her eyes, but not the truth. They'd stripped her of sight and choice both. I should have turned back into Hewitt's general store and minded my own damned fence, but she turned her head toward me like she could sense the shape of my hesitation. The street went quiet. Even the saloon piano lost its nerve. And inside that stillness, the question landed clear. "What are you going to do, Elias McCrae?" A clerk I didn't know pushed a paper at me. "Just need a mark, mister. Make it legal." The deputy laughed. "Go on, McCrae 1X, and she's yours. Maybe she'll find the fence posts for you. If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away. And if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming." I could have said no, could have walked away. But something in her stillness struck deeper than pride. It was the kind of strength that doesn't ask for rescue but still dares a man to be decent. My hand moved before my head agreed. The pen scratched. The crowd roared, and I knew I'd signed myself into trouble. "Congratulations," Wade sneered. "Blind as a bat, and yours for keeps." I folded the paper and stepped toward the crate. She didn't flinch when I cut the rawhide loose. Her wrists bore the marks, thin red circles that would fade slower than the day's laughter. I said, "Come on." She stepped down. "You don't have to play hero," she said quietly. When the cloth shifted, I caught a pale glaze in her eyes like stormed glass that reflected light but didn't drink it. "I'm not a hero," I answered, "just a fool who signed too slow." I lifted her onto my mare. Her hands found the saddle horn with sure grace, each motion measured. As we rode out, nobody stopped us. Brimstone Gulch shrank behind a place where mercy cost more than whiskey. The noise fell off our backs mile by mile, until the only thing chasing us was wind. Her name came after the ridge fell away. "Tala," she said, voice steady. "Means wolf." "Elias," I told her. "Means nothing worth remembering." She almost smiled. "Maybe you'll change that." The prairie spread wide and pale. Sagebrush leaned under the wind, sky heavy with the promise of early snow. I didn't know what to do with the woman riding behind me, light as a ghost, solid as guilt. Each time the horse shifted, her fingers brushed the back of my coat, and that small warmth felt louder than any word. By dusk, the ridge behind my ranch showed black against a dying Sunday. One cabin, one barn, one man's ghosts that was home. I reined in. "We're here." She turned her head toward the smell of wood smoke. "Your place?" "Yes." Inside, the air was cold but clean ash, leather, and lonesome years. I built a fire while she stood still, listening. When the kindling caught, her shoulders eased. I set coffee to boil and found my tongue again. "You can take the bed. I'll keep the chair." "I've slept on worse," she said. "Not tonight." She ran her hand along the table's edge, counting steps to the fire. Her fingers were scarred in small half-moons. "You keep things neat," she said. "Empty men do." She didn't answer. Just crouched near the flames, warming her palms, the light painting copper across her skin. For the first time since town, she looked like a person, not a punishment. I poured her coffee. She found the cup easily. Why did you sign? Because everyone else looked away, I said, and I couldn't stomach joining them. She nodded once. That's reason enough. Outside, coyotes started their talk. I fixed the door latch. She listened to the hammer's echo like she could see each strike. When I finished, she said softly, "You mend things gentle. Wood breaks if you force it." So do people. Silence held steady between us, warm instead of hollow. She unwrapped the blindfold and laid it on the table. The cloth was rough, stitched in blue thread too fine to be made by the men who'd mocked her. "Your own work?" I asked. "My mother's," she said. She said a woman's hands should never forget to make beauty, even if the world forgets her name. I didn't have an answer. Just watched the fire's reflection dance in the glaze of the tin mug. Her voice was calm, but it hit like a sermon stripped of church walls. When she finally sat on the bed, I turned away, giving her privacy the room barely allowed. The wind scratched the roof. I thought of the crowd, the laughter, and the sound of her voice saying wolf. Maybe I'd rescued her. Maybe she'd rescued the small part of me that still knew right from wrong. "You're not used to company," she said. "No." "Then we'll learn slow." Her certainty startled me. She wasn't asking to stay, she was stating a fact, the same way the horizon states where the sky ends. I took the chair. The fire dimmed to coals. She lay still, hair spilling dark against the pillow. For the first time in years, I wasn't the only soul breathing under that roof. Sleep came uneasy, full of ghosts. I dreamed of fences, of hands tying wire that cut back. When I woke, the cabin was quiet but not empty. Her steady breathing filled the space where loneliness used to live. I stirred the coals and added a log. The light touched her face, strong jaw, faint scars across her brow, eyes closed but peaceful. The blindfold lay folded beside her like a snake that had shed its skin. Outside, dawn scraped pink across the rim of the world. I stepped onto the porch. The frost bit my lungs, but it felt like proof I was still here. Down by the creek, the water ran thin over stone, whispering of work waiting to be done. When I came back in, Tala sat on the bed, hair braided loose, hands resting on her knees. "You could have left me there," she said. "Maybe," I replied. "But then I'd be one more coward hiding behind winter." She tilted her head, listening to the fire. "Then we'll start over." Her words landed simple and final. "We, not you." I poured her more coffee, the steam curling between us. She smiled faintly. "It's bitter," she said. "So's the world. Then we'll sweeten it." Outside, the wind had eased. The first sunlight caught the frost on the fence line and set it shining like new wire. For a moment, everything felt possible: the cabin, the land, even the two of us, bound not by pity or papers but by some quiet accident the world hadn't planned. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a ghost walking through his own life. I felt like a man starting one. Morning came gray and thin as tin. The fire was just coals. The cabin smelled of coffee grounds and smoke. Tala was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with her hair braided tight, eyes half on the window like she could hear what daylight was thinking about. "You rise early," I said, pouring water into the kettle. "I never stopped," she answered. "Sleep's a habit I never learned right." I nodded. I knew that kind of truth, the kind that comes out quiet, not for pity, but for record. I stirred the fire. The wind outside rattled the shutters. "North fence needs checking," I said. "Cattle drift that way when the weather shifts." She stood, laced her boots, and tied the laces in one hard motion. "I'll come," she said. "You don't have to." "Neither do you," she said, and that ended the argument. We stepped into the cold. The land had that high, dry stillness before snow, a waiting hush. The grass glittered with frost. Every hoofstep sounded like breaking glass. Dusty snorted, and Tala reached out to calm her without a word. The mare eased like she'd known her for years. We rode single file, following the creek. After a mile, the line of posts appeared, some upright, some tired. The top wire sagged where the wind had won an old argument. I dismounted, unhooked the coil of new wire from the saddle, and started pulling it tight. Tala watched for a moment, then crouched, testing the wire with her fingers. "You're pulling wrong," she said. "Wrong?" I almost smiled. "I've been mending fence since before you were born. Then you've been doing it wrong that long." She took the hammer from my belt, found the sweet spot in the post, and drove the staple with a rhythm cleaner than mine. The wire sang tight, not too high, not too loose. Now it'll hold through a storm. I watched her work. Her shoulders were narrow but strong, moving in measured grace. There was no pride in it, just precision. When she handed the hammer back, our fingers brushed. The touch was brief, but it stayed. We finished the run before noon. Sitting on a rock, I poured coffee from the flask. She took her cup with both hands, warming them. "Why do you live out here alone?" she asked. "I used to have reasons," I said. "Now I have habits. Habits can bury a man." I looked at her. "You speak like someone who's seen the hole." "I've dug a few," she said, "and I've climbed out of one." We sat quiet after that, letting the wind talk. It had the sound of something vast and old, the same voice that had been here before either of us, before fences, before laws. Back at the cabin, I repaired the barn door while Tala built a stew. The smell filled the place, beans, sage, dried meat. She moved around the small room like she belonged to its silence. When we sat down to eat, I said, "You don't owe me anything." She looked up, spoon in hand. "You think debt is the only reason people stay?" "I think it's the reason most leave." "Then you haven't seen people who stay because the land chooses them." That line hit somewhere I didn't expect. I'd always thought of the land as something you wrestled, not something that might want you back. We ate without talking. The fire hummed, the stew thickened in our bowls. When she finished, she took a small pouch from her pocket and sprinkled a pinch of dried herbs into the flames. The smoke curled blue, sweet, sharp. "What's that for?" I asked. "Memory," she said. "The dead like to be remembered before they turn bitter." I nodded. "Mary's name's carved in the cottonwood out back." She didn't flinch. "Then you've already remembered her." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the wood creak under my weight. "She died in a winter like this," I said. "Fever took her fast. After that I stopped building things that could fall apart." Tala stirred the fire. "And yet you signed for me." I smiled at that. Guess even broken men forget their rules once in a while. Outside, the day folded into dusk. The wind was turning meaner. I could smell snow coming the way the air sharpens before it falls. I went out to check the yard. The clouds had settled low, heavy and gray. Across the pasture, a few cattle pressed together for warmth. On the ridge, I saw 3 riders, Hollister and his men. They stopped at my fence line but didn't cross, just watched. The deputy lifted his hand in a slow mock salute. Then they turned and rode back toward town. When I came in, Tala was standing by the window, eyes fixed on where they'd been. "He'll come again," she said. "I know. He wants your land. He can't have it. He doesn't ask. He takes." I checked the rifle leaning against the wall. "Then I'll keep asking him to try." Her voice softened. "Don't fight his way." "Out here," I said, "sometimes there's only his way or no way." Look. She turned to me, face calm but fierce. "Then make your own. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here." That night the wind came hard. I went to the barn with a lantern to brace the roof beams. Tala followed without a word. When the gusts hit, the lantern swung, throwing light across her face, calm, focused, hands steady on the nails. I passed her. A loose plank slammed, and I nearly slipped on the beam. She reached up, gripped the joist, and locked it with both arms, holding until I found my footing. "Careful," I muttered. "Always," she said. We worked till the lantern burned low. When we came inside, we were soaked with sweat and dust, the kind that gets into your bones. She went straight to the stove, poured hot water, and threw in a handful of herbs. The smell filled the air sharp, clean, alive. "Drink," she said. I did. It burned sweet down my throat. "What is it?" "Something to keep the cold out of your joints," she said, "and to make you sleep without ghosts." I half smiled. "That strong?" She looked at me over the rim of her cup. "You'll dream, but you'll wake up." We sat at the table. Snow began to fall, slow flakes tapping against the window like a gentle warning. She took a small needle and thread from her satchel. "I'll fix that pocket of yours," she said. "It'll hold fine. It'll hold better my way." Her fingers worked quick, steady. Each stitch sounded like a heartbeat. When she finished, she bit the thread clean and smiled slightly. "There. You carry your knife here, yes? Now it won't slip through." I ran my hand over the seam. "You sew like a surgeon." She nodded. "When you live on the edge, your hands learn the difference between cutting and keeping." We sat quiet a while. The storm thickened outside. The fire softened inside. The cabin felt small, but not empty. "Tala," I said finally, "what do you want out of this?" She looked up, eyes calm as coals. "A place where I'm not property." "You already have that. I have your word. But the law still thinks I'm a bond." "The law doesn't live here," I said. "Not anymore. Though." She reached out and touched the old scar that ran down my neck, a relic from the war. "That cut healed," she said. "So will this." It wasn't a promise. It was a statement, simple and solid as the land outside. The fire popped. The shadows drew long on the walls. I felt something uncoil inside me that had been locked tight for years. Maybe it was trust. Maybe just the start of it. We talked till the logs burned low. She told me about her tribe, her father's exile, her mother's quiet death beside a dried river. She spoke with no anger, only memory. I told her about Mary, about a grave under the cottonwood that faced west so she could see the sunsets she loved. Tala listened without pity. When I finished, she said, "Then she's still seeing them. The dead don't stop watching, they just stop asking questions." Outside, the storm howled. Inside, her eyes caught the firelight and threw it back. I felt the weight of the day slide off my shoulders like snow from a roof. When she finally lay down, she didn't turn away this time. I stayed in the chair, but close enough to hear her breathing steady and sure. For the first time in years, the sound of another soul didn't make me restless, it made the night bearable. I thought of Hollister, of fences and storms and laws written by men who'd never built a home. But mostly I thought of the woman in my bed, and the quiet courage she carried like a hidden knife. The wind pressed against the walls and failed to get in. And for once, I didn't mind the sound it made trying. By the next morning, the storm had teeth. Snow came sideways, biting like ground glass. The kind of wind that makes a man forget where his hands end and the cold begins. The sky was one color steel, and the land answered in silence. I tightened my coat, threw another log into the stove, and glanced at Tala. She was binding bundles of dried sage and cedar, her movements steady, measured. Smoke from the fire curled around her like a soft gray shawl. "You've seen weather like this before?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "The wind is the same everywhere. Only people change." I looked out the window. "Well, this one's about to knock the roof clear into Nebraska." She stood and grabbed a blanket. "Then we'll hold it down." Outside, the world had turned white sky, earth, fence, all one breath of ice. I could barely see the barn through the flurry. The door banged open and shut, hinges crying for mercy. I pulled my scarf tight and pushed into the storm. Tala followed without hesitation, the snow clinging to her hair like silver threads. The wind roared, but her voice cut through it. "The animals? They'll panic if the roof gives," I shouted back. Inside the barn, the air smelled of hay, leather, and fear. Cattle shifted and moaned, hooves clattering. I grabbed the lantern and held it high. The roof creaked. One board was already loose, slamming like a drum against the rafters. "Hold the ladder," I called. She planted her boots and gripped it firm while I climbed. Nails and hammer clutched in one hand. The gusts slammed against the wall hard enough to rattle my bone. I pinned the board, driving nails till the hammer's handle went slick with frost. Below, Tala braced the ladder, face turned up, eyes bright in the lantern light. A gust tore through, and a shower of snow burst through the gap above me. I lost footing, half slid down. She caught my arm, muscles locking like iron. "You good?" she shouted. "Yeah," I breathed. "Good enough." We finished the patch together, me hammering, her feeding nails, both of us cursing the wind by name. When we climbed down, the roof had stopped screaming. I laughed once, short and surprised. Hell of a way to spend a morning. Tala grinned, cheeks flushed from cold. Keeps the blood from freezing. Back in the cabin, the heat hit us like mercy. I stripped off my gloves, rubbed my hands over the stove. Tala poured water into a pot, her fingers stiff but steady. When the steam rose, it carried that sharp herbal scent again, sage, bark, smoke, and something faintly sweet. "You always make medicine," I said. "You always find trouble," she replied. "We each do what we know." I couldn't argue. For a while, we just listened to the storm talk to itself on the roof. Then she asked, "Why do you keep that rifle so close?" "Because peace doesn't stay bought," I said. "Does it ever get tiring waiting for someone to come take it?" I stared at the fire. "You get used to it." She shook her head. "No one should." I didn't know whether she meant me or herself. By afternoon, the snow had piled knee-deep. I took the shovel to clear the door. Tala joined, scooping with a pan, laughing once when the drift fought back. We worked till we could see the steps again, breathing clouds into the air. When we went back inside, the world felt a little wider, like we'd claimed a patch of it together. She warmed her hands over the stove, then looked at me, serious now. "Hollister won't wait for spring." "I know. He'll say you stole me." "I didn't." Truth never stopped men like him. Her words hung there, heavy as wet wood. I thought of the look on Wade's face, that lazy smirk that meant he'd already decided how this story ended. "He'll come," I said, "but he won't take you." She met my eyes. "He won't take your land either if you remember who you are." "Who am I then?" She studied me a moment. "A man who still believes doing right matters, even when it costs him everything." I laughed once, low. "That's a fancy way to call me stubborn." "It's the same word in my tongue," she said and smiled. "If you've been reading this long, hey there, friend. Take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. Your body will thank you." The storm finally began to die near dusk. The sky turned from gray to the faintest pink, like someone remembered to light a candle after the funeral. I stepped outside. The air was sharp, quiet. The world glittered. Every post on the fence wore a crown of snow. It was beautiful, in that hard Western way, beauty you had to earn by surviving it. Behind me, I heard the door open. Tala stepped out, wrapped in the blanket, eyes half closed against the brightness. "It's clean again," she said softly. "Yeah, for now." She touched the porch rail, feeling the frost melt under her palm. "You build fences, Elias. You fix roofs. But the thing you're really mending is yourself." I wanted to deny it. Instead, I said, "Then I hope I've got enough nails." She smiled, small but real. "You do." That night, we shared the last of the stew. The storm had scrubbed the world quiet. Even the creek sounded gentler. Tala sat near the fire, combing her hair with her fingers. I watched her, trying to memorize the rhythm, the way each movement seemed to say, "I'm still here." "You staring?" she asked without looking up, "just making sure the fire's holding." "It is," she said, and the way she said it made me believe she meant more than wood and flame. Later, she took out her small medicine pouch and began sewing something. I pretended not to watch. "What's that?" I asked finally. "A charm," she said. "For strength. For you. For this place." She set it on the mantel, a braid of horsehair and blue thread. The same blue as the blindfold she'd worn that day in town. "Looks better there than on your eyes," I said. Her gaze flicked to me, calm and steady. It was never mine to wear. The fire cracked between us. For the first time, the silence felt like company, not distance. She rose, took the spare blanket, and laid it across my shoulders. "You'll catch cold," she said simply. "You always take care of people?" "Only the ones who need it," she said. Her hand brushed my arm light, deliberate. A moment later, she went to bed. I sat there, feeling the warmth where her hand had been long after she'd turned away. Outside, the snow still whispered. Inside, I realized I wasn't afraid of the quiet anymore. When I finally let sleep take me, it wasn't empty, it had her in it. Not as a ghost or a burden, but as something alive and near. And somewhere in that dream, I heard her voice again. "The wind is the same everywhere, only people change." When I woke, the storm had passed. The world beyond the window was clean, untouched, and mine again, but not mine alone anymore. The snow had been gone a week when I saw them coming. 3 riders, dark shapes against the pale ridge, moving slow and sure like men who didn't expect to be stopped. The air had that strange quiet that comes before trouble. The horses' hooves broke through the crust of thawed snow, dull and heavy. I could smell dust, sweat, and the sour bite of whiskey drifting ahead of them. Tala was by the barn, mending a rope by touch. Her hands worked smooth, steady, tracing each fiber like it had a story to tell. I stepped onto the porch, rifle leaning easy against my shoulder. The wind carried their laughter first low, mean, the kind that always means to hurt before it hits. Then came Hollister's voice, cutting through the cold. "Well, look at that. McCrae's got himself company again." I didn't answer. Words only feed snakes. I watched them ride closer until their horses kicked slush across my yard. The lead horse snorted steam. The others followed, stamping like they owned the ground. "Afternoon, deputy," I said finally. "Afternoon, nothing," he spat. "You've been harboring a runaway." "Runaway from what? From you?" He grinned, but it was a thin thing, sharp as broken glass. "From the law. That bond you signed don't mean spit. Ain't no judge gonna honor it. She's property, not a wife." Behind me, Tala stood quiet, a shadow in the doorway. Her face was calm, but her eyes, those clouded gray eyes, looked like storm clouds right before they break. "You done here," I said. "Not till I take her." "You're not taking anything from this land, Wade." He looked past me at her and smirked. "You sure you want to waste your days with a blind squaw, McCrae? Ain't much she can do for you except make you the talk of every saloon between here and Laramie." The men laughed, brittle and cruel. The sound scraped my nerves like spurs on stone. I leveled the rifle, not high, not low, just enough. "You got 10 seconds to ride off, or I'll start counting down from 5. Hollister's grin faded. His eyes narrowed, measuring whether I was bluff or bullet. He must have seen something there that didn't bend easy. "Fine," he said finally, tugging his reins. "But you remember, McCrae, law don't forget." He turned his horse. Snow scattered under hooves like torn paper. The other 2 followed. When they disappeared beyond the ridge, I lowered the rifle. My hands were steady. My chest wasn't. The cold bit deeper now that danger had passed. Tala stepped beside me. "You'd fight them?" "I just did." That wasn't fighting. That was warning. She was right, and we both knew it. Hollister would be back with more men, more paper, more hate disguised as duty. I stared out toward the fence line. "If they come again, we'll be ready." "We?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "We." "Oh." Something in her shoulders eased then, like a rope gone slack after being pulled too long. The next few days, we worked quiet. She stitched new straps for the saddle. I fixed the gate that winter had warped. The rhythm of work made time move different, less like waiting, more like living. That night, over stew, Tala said softly, "The man who raised me said strength isn't loud. It's what keeps you from bending when the world pushes too hard." "He sounds wise." "He was cruel," she said, "but he taught me truth without meaning to." We sat there a long time, watching the fire chew through the last of the pine. Outside, the moon rose white and sure, turning the snowfields into a sea of light. After supper, I found her standing by the door, head tilted toward the wind. "What do you hear?" I asked. "The wolves," she said. "They're hunting close tonight." "You afraid?" She shook her head. "They don't kill without hunger. Men do." I didn't argue. There wasn't a word in me that could. If you're watching on TV, don't hesitate, grab your phone and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters. 2 days later, they came back. This time with 4 horses and a wagon. I saw the dust, first a brown ghost rising against the white hills. My gut went cold. Tala was down by the creek, washing clothes. I walked toward her slow. "Go inside," I said. She froze, water dripping from her hands. "Them? Yeah. Her jaw set. "Then I'm not hiding." "You don't need to." I said, "I'm not hiding, Elias." By the time they rode into the yard, she was standing beside me, hand brushing my sleeve like an anchor in wind. Hollister dismounted, boots crunching on the half-frozen mud. Behind him climbed down a man in a long black coat, a judge, or something pretending to be one. His beard was gray, his eyes colder than the snow. "Morning, McCrae," Hollister said. "Brought the circuit judge. We're here to settle this proper." The judge unrolled a paper, reading through wind and dust. "By order of Red Rock Ridge Territorial Office, woman known as Tala, daughter of Chief Nanton, to be returned to tribal custody for resale or reassignment." The words hit like stone. "She ain't property," I said, voice low but steady. The judge didn't even look up. "Not your place to say. She's under my roof, by my name. That's my place." Hollister grinned. "You gonna argue law, McCrae? You can't even argue your own past." Tala stepped forward. "I'm not a thing," she said. "You can't sell me." The judge frowned. "The law says otherwise." "Then your law's blind," she said. Her words hung in the cold, clear as a bell. Pride rose in me like heat, quiet, sharp, clean. "Judge," I said, "you turn that wagon around. You leave this land in peace." Hollister's hand twitched toward his pistol. I raised the rifle first. "Don't," I warned. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Even the horses stopped breathing. Snow drifted between us like ash from some old fire that never died. The judge's voice cracked. "Put that gun down, McCrae. Not till you leave." He hesitated, his lips white as paper. Then he nodded to Hollister. "We'll go, but this ain't over." They mounted slow, turned their horses, and rode off into the pale distance. When the sound of hooves finally faded, I lowered the rifle. My heart still pounded, but the fear was gone. What stayed was heavier, steadier resolve. Tala reached for my arm. "You didn't have to do that." "I did. They'll send more men. Then they'll find the same answer." She shook her head, her braids swinging like a whip. "You'll die for something the world doesn't care about." I looked at her. The world never cared when it should have. "I ain't doing this for them." Her lips parted. "Then for who?" "For you," I said. "And for me, because neither of us deserves to be owned again." The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was alive like the air after lightning. She stepped closer, her fingers finding my jaw, tracing the scar just below my ear. Her touch was gentle, but it burned like truth. "This wound," she whispered. "Who gave it to you?" "A war that didn't end when the shooting stopped." Her thumb brushed the line of it. "Then let it end now." I couldn't move, didn't want to. She rested her hand over my heart. "You don't have to fight everything alone, Elias," she said softly. "Not when someone already sees you." For a moment, the world shrank to firelight. Snow, her breath against my throat, and the ache inside me that finally began to feel like healing. I covered her hand with mine. "You sure you want to see a man like me?" She smiled, faint but real. "I already do." That night, the cabin glowed warm against the cold. The wind eased. The stars above looked close enough to touch. We sat by the fire, hands touching without need for words. The storm outside, the storm inside me, both quiet now. And though I knew men like Hollister would come again with their papers and threats, I also knew this much. I wouldn't face them alone ever again. By the time the snow shrank to thin silver veins along the fence line, the land began to breathe again. The creek loosened its grip on the ice. Grass pushed up in thin, brave patches. I woke to birds I hadn't heard in months, and a kind of light that felt like a promise. Tala stood in the doorway, the wind pulling her braid over one shoulder. "The air smells awake," she said. "Maybe we can be too." We worked side by side without talking much. I fixed the barn roof that winter had peeled back. She mended halters and fed herbs to a calf coughing its first spring. Her hands were sure, her patience endless. Every nail I drove seemed to drive something loose in me too: anger, grief, the habit of silence. At noon, we carried coffee to the ridge. The whole valley spread below, wet and shining. "You ever think we'll leave this place?" I asked. She smiled slightly. "People like us don't leave, we grow roots, even in rock." Oh, I wanted to argue, but she was right. Out here, leaving was just another kind of staying gone. That evening we ate by lamplight. I watched the fire catch in her hair. The paper Hollister had made me sign still lay folded on the shelf, brittle as a dead leaf. I took it down, fed it to the stove, and watched the ink curl into flame. Tala didn't speak until it was ash. "Now it's only truth," she said. "Truth and land," I answered. "And choice," she added. Don't forget choice. Of. Days lengthened. The cattle grazed higher. The creek ran clear. We built a small pen near the cottonwood where Mary's grave marker leaned. I cut a second plank and carved Tala beside Mary. When she traced the letters with her fingertips, she smiled. 2 names, she whispered. Both seen, I said. Both loved. If you've made it this far, I know you're a true fan of WWL. From the bottom of my heart, I wish your day is filled with health and happiness, and may a little stroke of luck find you in the next 15 minutes. Don't forget to share it with me in the comments. Spring came honest. We rode the fence line each morning, fixing what the frost had broken. Tala carried nails in her pocket, feeling each one before handing it over like a priest giving communion. When the wind rose, she'd hum low and sure until even the horse settled. I began to think the world might listen to her before it listened to God. One night, thunder rolled far off toward the Black Hills. She stood by the window, blind eyes lifted. "Storm coming?" I asked. "Only enough to remind us we're alive," she said. And when the rain finally hit, it washed months of dust from the roof and years of weight from my chest. We never spoke vows. We didn't need to. We just kept showing up her with medicine and patience, me with hammers and stubbornness. Freedom, I learned, isn't the road stretching west. It's waking up beside someone who chooses to stay. In town, they still whispered. Some called me fool, some called her curse, but a few quiet ones who'd buried their own pain started to nod when we rode through for supplies. One old woman touched Tala's sleeve and asked, "You got a home, child?" "Yes," Tala said simply. "That's enough," the woman answered, and it was. Weeks later, we sat by the fire with coffee and rain tapping the roof. Tala leaned her head on my shoulder. "The world's big," she said. "Bigger than both of us." "Good," she murmured. "Then there's room to forgive it." Forgiveness, she made it sound easy. Maybe it was, if you quit trying to win and just learn to endure. I had spent years fighting ghosts. Now I was learning to live with one and love another. That summer we planted beans along the south wall and hung her beads above the door. The cabin smelled of cedar and bread. She told me the land had adopted us, and for once I believed something I couldn't see. At dusk, I'd find her on the porch, listening to the creek. Sometimes I'd sit beside her, sometimes behind, our shoulders touching. When I asked what she heard, she said, "Everything's still trying." If you want truth told plain, that's all. Life is everything still trying. The wind, the grass, a blind woman who learned to see without eyes, and a man who forgot how to quit. One morning I caught my reflection in the well bucket, older, softer, still scarred but not ruled by it. Tala came up beside me, touched the mark on my jaw. "That wound isn't ugly," she said. "It's proof you survived long enough to change." I covered her hand with mine. "And you?" "I changed the moment you looked and didn't look away." We spent that day fixing a broken gate. She tied the final knot, tugged it tight, and smiled. "Now it won't fail." "Like us," I said. "Like us," she echoed. That night, we sat on the step watching fireflies stitch light between the cottonwoods. The air smelled of rain and wild mint. I told her the old war stories, the ones that used to taste like iron. She listened without pity, then said, "You're done carrying their ghosts. Let them walk home alone." I believed her. At dawn, the world looked washed clean. No riders came from town. Maybe they'd forgotten. Maybe mercy had found them too. Either way, the ridge was ours again. We saddled Dusty and rode along the creek just to see where it went. The water talked fast, the way children do when they've been told to be quiet too long. We followed it until the hills swallowed sound. There, Tala slipped from the saddle, stood ankle deep, and turned her face toward the Sunday. "This is what freedom feels like," she said. "Cold?" I asked. "Alive," she smiled. We rode back slow, the horses blowing steam. When the cabin came into view, small, stubborn, shining in the light, I realized it looked like us. Built from weather, still standing. That night we shared a single blanket and let the wind sing through the cracks. No promises, no fear. Just 2 names carved in wood and a heartbeat steady enough for both. I used to think healing meant forgetting. Now I know it means remembering without bleeding. Tala taught me that with every touch that didn't demand, with every silence that didn't wound, if anyone asks what kind of tale this is, I'll tell them straight. It's one of those cowboy love stories that never make the dime novels, because the wildest thing about it isn't the gunfire, but the grace. It's Wild West love that rides slower, lasts longer, and teaches a man that kindness is the hardest thing worth keeping. It's a Wild West love story where two people stop running and finally let the land and each other be enough.